Redneck Garage. Well, I'm plodding on with a 1988 Toyota remodel, restoration, whatever you want to call it. Bring it back to life. And I've been working on the sides of the beds, and I've been looking at the fiberglass bed sides. That's really kind of my biggest stumbling block. Let's take a look at where I'm at. I think I've got some stuff figured out, which that'd be good. Alright, I'm doing a little ciphering on the side of the bed. If I cut out the bad pieces, what do I have left? Not very much. If I'm going to try to fit this other fiberglass piece over the top of this one. So I'm thinking I'm almost going to have to take this off and put that on. You can see that there's a seam right here, so I may be able to seam it right in here and leave this part of the tailgate to go on. I got some unistrut here to make a piece to go across the top to give it a little bit of structure, you know, like in the top here. And that's kind of going to be the plan, I guess. I don't know. I'm just guessing right now. I think I'm just going to have to sit back and cipher on this for a minute. Maybe you get a beer. I think this is really going to be the hardest part for me, is to get over the hump and figure out how I'm going to do these fiberglass bedsides. Once I get those on, then it's really going to be pretty easy to paint and do the body work on it. There's not a lot of body work. Once the bedsides are ready to prime and shoot, get the topper and everything else, but it does have to be substantial enough to hold the bedsides, not let them sag or crack or flex, and hold up a topper without having the whole thing just fall to the ground. So I'm going with just like a wing and a prayer on some of that. So truthfully, this is going to be one of the hardest things, is for me to figure out, just, you know, in the redneck engineering way, how to get these bedsides on there where they're cut off everything, which I'm almost at that point now of going, you know, this is the only way to do it. Once I'd started cutting the seam where it had rusted out, I started looking at it going, okay, what have I really got as far as metal goes to glue onto or to attach to? And there really wasn't that much, to tell you the truth. So where we're going is taking these bottom two sections off, this apron and this apron, cleaning this all up where you got a good clean surface. This bar is going to mount, you can kind of see, where there's a channel in there. I'm going to mount that there. That'll give me some support and structure to hang the fiberglass over. And all I've got to do now is kind of figure out where the sheet metal goes around this edge right here, you see. And down on this end, the trickiest part is going to be, am I going to take it off here, or if I'm going to carry it all around? Trying to figure out what I'm going to do with this, if I'm going to stop the fiberglass right here and try to cut a seam in, or continue all around. That's just going to kind of be the tricky part, because the fiberglass, to tell you the truth, from Toyota fiberglass is pretty substantial. It's not like it's real super floppy or anything, but it does need some support or it will move around. Okay, I can tell you this hasn't been that fun. I do have the bar kind of mounted on the top. It isn't welded in yet, but it is kind of giving me an idea of where it's at. You can see how floppy this bed is right now. But I did get all the pieces off, separated. I've got a little bit of cleanup to do on this bottom edge. I got the back end torn apart where, like I said, the nuts are. And we're going to put the fiberglass on now and just kind of see how it fits up, because I have no clue how this is going to look. But well, so far so good. This needs to go over the end here. Fiberglass is a little bit thicker. I believe the dimensions on this fiberglass are just exactly right. I don't think there's any issues with the way Corey made it. I've got to trim a little bit here. You can see that this is going over rather than flush. So I think I may be able to move that in. This piece is bolted on. So if I can move that in, that'll give me a little more room in the back. Just having it sitting up there, though, makes me visualize how nice it actually is going to look after a lot more work. Got all this metal trimmed out around the old tail light here, and this actually did go over the metal piece in the back. Now I don't know how thick this is. Now I'm not sure if I'm going to have a problem with the thickness of this fiberglass. It doesn't look like it's super thick, so hopefully my tailgate will just lay in here. I'm going to have a little bit of sanding and body work. I'm going to have a little bit of sanding and body work down here on the bottom, but for the most part this looks really, really good. You can see that the seam runs right up the fiberglass to the very front, which looks superb. There's no gaps, there's no nothing. I mean, it's right up on top of that for the most part. And then in the back here, I'm going to make sure that this is all the way in, but I couldn't be happier with the way that thing is laying in there. Now I'm going to take off the bed side again and probably do a couple of little minor adjustments, like right in here. That looks good though. And treat all that rust, because we don't want to put this fiberglass back on where it's rusting, and then we'll be ready to rock and roll with that. So I got the bar set up in there, and it's up against the top of this and at an angle that kind of like the angle of that. And what I'm going to do is get my welder and tack that in, and then once I get the side back off, I'm going to weld this in there really well, and that'll give it a little bit of support at the top for like the topper to sit on top of. But I mean, once we put some fiberglass in the sides, it's going to be held on there pretty well. And this fiberglass from Toyota Fiberglass is pretty substantial. You can see how thick it is. I trimmed it right here, and that should be just fine. Fill that in and be ready to rock and roll. Looks good. So with the bar going across the top, I've tried to recreate the original one a little bit. If you look inside there, you can see that there's a channel on the inner portion, and then the fender itself goes around the outer part, which would be the fiberglass with that metal. So hopefully it'll be like that. You can see the stinking rust in here. So when I started looking at the design of this truck and how come every one of them you see is rusted out, I found some pretty cool information, right? First of all, that the beds weren't made in Japan. The truck was made in Japan, brought over as a cabin chassis, because they were trying to get around the tariff on small trucks called the chicken tax. Google that. I don't have time to get into the chicken tax. It's insane. 25% tariff was paid to the United States to bring in a small pickup truck, and that's what Toyota was facing. Anyway, so the bed was made in the Long Beach, California plant. All the truck beds were made over there. It gave Toyota a couple things. Originally, it allowed them to escape the tariff, and then the United States changed the rules and they started having to pay it. However, they also were able to say, look, we build this stuff in the United States too. We're hiring people from America. You know, we're patriotic. There's actually ads saying Toyota's patriotic. So that was one of the reasons they built the beds, also in addition in Long Beach. Now the second problem with these beds, truthfully, was that it was designed in Japan. They don't have salt used on their roads. And the way that this bed was designed, with the outer bed and then two sandwiches, piece of metal, I'll show you here in just a second, it just created a pocket for that salt and water, mud, whatever, to get in there. And once it started rusting, there was no stopping it, because the metal that they used could have been a little bit better. So every one of these stinking things rusted eventually, and it came from the bottom, not from inside the bed. Usually it was the salt that came up from the bottom, got up into that seam, and then just ate it up like cancer. And it's called Toyota cancer or Toyota bed rot. It's all the same stuff. It was a bad design flaw with these trucks. And I'm really kind of surprised that there's not more people making bedsides for them, or metal replacement panels, but maybe it's just too old. I don't know. But let's take a look at the design of the bed, and that's what I'm talking about. When you're looking at this, this actually would go down underneath the bed. So you had the bed, then you had the top piece which had a lip, and then you had the bottom apron here that had a lip. So they all came up there, and then it's just spot welded all the way up and down. And they put a little bit, you can kind of see still there, a little bit of seam sealer. But eventually this seam sealer would crack, something would happen with the vibrations. Once that salt water and rust started happening, there was no treating it or stopping it, just because of the way that it was made. And because it was like that's three-piece design, 1, 2, 3, it just started rusting completely out. This side we're going to do the same thing as the other. I'm going to start whacking and so on. Once I get that side secured and not flopping around. But I'm super happy with the way that bed is turning out. And rather than trying to leave some of the old metal, I'm happy that we're taking it all out. Once we get that seam all cleaned up on the bed side, we're going to just lay some fiberglass in there, and it's going to be smooth as cat's back. I think it's going to turn out awesome. Corey was right. This is very, very time consuming. From going back and looking at it, this rebar channel is going to work great as a top support for this bar. Trying to use the old metal was just a no starter once I got into it, and tearing the old stuff out is really a huge pain in the butt. But it's going to be awesome. So we're going to continue on with this. I'm going to try to get this knocked down and some of the rust treated. I'll go over how we treat the rust with some Eastwood products, and pretty soon we'll be starting prepping this thing. I'm excited. I'm David from the Redneck Garage. Keep turning wrenches.